Delta easily cuts down Nelson's copies, but something seems wrong. Nelson mentions that the closer they are to the center of the sanctuary, the more their power gets drained. Alpha adds that as Nelson gets closer to the center, he gains more power. Nelson had hoped to get even closer, but thinks that he has come far enough to defeat them. We then see Aurora walking in a separate dimension, and ask Cid what he's doing. We then see Cid walking under Aurora, matching her footsteps. He mentions that this place has no sense of direction, and Aurora wonders if he's trying to check out her plot. They then progress to another memory, a battlefield filled with casualties. They find a young Aurora crying, and she takes Cid's sword, intending to kill the young Aurora to end the memory. However, the deceased soldiers come back to life, and they try to attack her. Cid saves her, and we also notice he has his right eye closed for some reason. Aurora explains that the sanctuary is rejecting them. Cid asks what will happen if Aurora dies, and she believes that she will return to the first room where they met. We then see Epsilon's group who encounter a sick person, but as they pass through Epsilon, the person vanishes. Epsilon explains that it was likely a memory that reacted to their presence and materialized. They discover an archive with information about the possessed and realize that this fate could have befallen them if they hadn't encountered Shadow. They use the Polaroid cameras which Ada has created based on Shadow's information, and they use them to capture images of the files. Just then, their slime outfits begin to disappear as they are closer to the core, and their plot is about to be exposed. Epsilon's slime cannon falls off, creating an awkward moment, but she quickly reattaches it. Meanwhile, Cid and Aurora easily handle the approaching zombies. However, as more zombies start to surround them, Cid decides to end the memory by killing the young Aurora. They finally reach the center of the sanctuary. On the other hand, despite losing power, Delta continues to overwhelm Nelson, who is astonished by her strength. However, her plot armor is barely holding up. Nelson then unleashes his full power to create more clones, but Delta counters with her own ultimate move. Aurora informs Cid that their next objective is to destroy the magic core, which is located on the other side of a door. Cid considers cutting the chains holding the door but worries that his sword might not be powerful enough and could break in the process. They notice a sword in front of the door, and Aurora explains that it bears inscriptions indicating it can cut the chains. Cid attempts to pull the sword from the ground but finds it impossible to move, and concludes that only the chosen one can wield it. Aurora then spots a sign stating that the holy sword can only be drawn by direct descendants, and is surprised at how quickly Cid deciphered the magical inscription. With no other means to open the door, they decide to sit and wait. Meanwhile, we witness Delta destroying Nelson's clones, and the girls are amazed by her strength, but think that she's just a musclehead. As Delta kills the last clone, the memory shatters, and Nelson is shocked that they killed over 100 of his clones without even breaking a sweat. Alpha explains that even if he were to create 100 copies, they would all share one brain, making them challenging to control effectively. Nelson then notices a statue of Olivier, and calls for her to come. Olivier appears, but at the same time, Epsilon joins Alpha. She tells Alpha that they have completed their investigation, and are free to leave at any time. Alpha decides to leave, surprising Nelson with their decision. Alpha mentions that their sole objective was to cut off the source of power. They now understand how the sanctuary's defenses operate, and plan to return later. As Alpha and the rest of the group leave, Nelson starts wondering what to tell the others. He plans to explain that he lured them there to expose their identities, and intends to obtain Alpha's blood to help perfect the beads. However, he suddenly receives a notification indicating the presence of someone else in the sanctuary center, and decides to go there with Olivier. Cid asks Aurora why she wants to disappear, and she explains that once the core is destroyed, she will finally be free from the prison of repeating memories. Cid assures her that things will work out, and expects the main hero to arrive and pull out the sword. Just as they hope for the Chosen One's arrival, the magic seal appears, exciting Cid as he anticipates the arrival of the chosen hero. However, Nelson appears, and Cid wonders if it's one of those scenarios where the villain arrives first. Cid also notices Olivier, and thinks she resembles Alpha. Nelson sends Olivier to attack them, and Cid confronts her. Olivier attacks Cid, who initially manages to block her strikes. However, she eventually sends him flying and shatters his sword. Cid is excited, and Olivier launches another attack, injuring Cid. Nelson is annoyed that Cid is still alive, and orders Olivier to finish him off. Just then, Aurora intervenes, pleading with Cid to stop. Although she doesn't remember well, she knows that no human can defeat Olivier. She tells Cid that he has done enough, and given her more new memories than she could have asked for. Nelson offers her a deal: if she agrees to help him with their work, he will spare Cid. Cid interrupts their conversation, telling her that he doesn't need assistance, and that they shouldn't assume he will lose. Annoyed, Nelson orders Olivier to kill him, and as she stabs Cid with her sword, Cid smiles and opens his right eye, which he had kept closed for some time, mentioning that he has got her. He grabs her and bites her neck, ripping it and defeating her. Nelson wonders how he's still alive after being stabbed, and Cid explains that if you protect your arteries and vital organs, it's easy to survive a stabbing. Nelson mentions that he is surprised to see Olivier getting defeated by a kid with no magic, but he states that she was just a copy. With the amount of magic he has in the center of the sanctuary, he summons countless copies of Olivier. Many copies attack Cid, but he opens his right eye, and defeats them using his magic. Nelson is surprised that he is able to use magic, and Cid explains that he just tampered with the magic until it was too solid to be absorbed. It took him some time, but it's something simple. Nelson is shocked, and orders the Olivier copies to kill him. Cid fights them, but as his wound continues to bleed, he tells them that playtime is over. He starts casting his magic, and Aurora is surprised by the amount of magic he has. Just then, a copy of Olivier stabs him. However, Cid is unaffected and uses his atomic move to obliterate all Olivier copies, along with the chain door and everything else. Cid wakes up with Aurora by his side. She is surprised that he survived being stabbed in the heart, and Cid explains that he used magic to move his heart to the other side. Aurora starts disappearing and confesses that she was the one who called him. She mentions that she lied about other things as well, but Cid is fine with it. Aurora states that for a long time, she wanted to fade away and forget everything, but now she has a memory she doesn't want to forget. She hoped she got more time for their plot development, but her time is up, and she thanks Cid before completely disappearing. Alexia feels frustrated for being weak, and unable to do anything. She suggests to Rose and Beta that they gather more information before deciding on their course of action. Beta questions what Alexa intends to do with the information, and Alexia suggests that they might be able to join forces and establish a base of operations. Beta states that they have no solid plan, but Rose is on board, and Beta also agrees to form a team. Beta humorously mentions that they already have a team with a hero, a wise woman, and a deadweight, to which Alexia playfully asks if Beta is referring to herself as the deadweight. Epsilon reports to Alpha that the sanctuary has been obliterated, including the holy sword, and the magical core has vaporized. Alpha acknowledges that it was the simplest and most effective solution, one that only Shadow could have achieved. Epsilon also reveals that Beta is working with Alexia, and that if things go well, Beta can infiltrate her inner circle. Epsilon further confirms their theory that Aurora has another name, the Demon Diablos. Alpha then instructs her to be ready for their next performance in the royal capital of Midgar. Meanwhile, a man tries to persuade Gamma to buy prime property in Madlid, and open her business there. Initially unsure, Gamma's decision becomes clear when one of her employees informs her that they have found petroleum. She decides to purchase every property on that street, with plans to redevelop the city and make it the greatest in Velgalta. Back at the Shadow Garden base, Alpha observes her team, and recalls an earlier time with Cid when they established their first base of operations. She tells him that they need to start training the girls, as they will soon be facing the cult. Cid mentions that he will give them power, and thinks that kids living on their own should know some self-defense techniques. In the present, Alpha receives a message from the Oriana Kingdom, indicating that the Royal Chancellor, Perv Asshat, is visiting Midgar. We then see Alexia and Iris in the hot bath, where Alexia explains to Iris that the Archbishop was part of the cult. To keep the sanctuary a secret, they need a significant organization, and Alexia wants to investigate the divine teaching. Iris had suggested the same thing to their father, but he told them not to take any action. However, Iris feels that if she wins the Bushin festival again, she will gain more support from the people, and their father will have to listen to her. Alexia wonders if the cult or Shadow Garden will get involved, but Iris is confident in her sword skills. Iris wonders why Alexia went into the sanctuary, but Alexia pretends to act dumb, and excuses herself. Iris reflects that her Crimson Knights lost their strongest members as soon as they were organized, and likely won't be able to rebuild. The Knight Order had been supporting her, but she believes they now hate her for taking their strongest members, and letting them die. She hopes to regain her status by winning the tournament. Just then, she hears a noise, which came from Alexia using the towel to clean her plot, using the trick she learned from Cid. We then see Rose training, however, she starts to feel strange, and a demonic possession mark appears on her chest. After that, we see that the Bushin festival is starting, and strong warriors from all over the world are gathering. Cid also wants to enter the tournament, not to compete as a strong fighter, but to experience how an overpowered MC pretends to be weak, and then surprises everyone with his hidden strength. He visits Gamma, and asks for her help in creating a disguise for him to enter the festival. When she questions why he needs a disguise, Cid mentions that it's a secret. Gamma uses a special slime gel to apply on his face, and mentions that it will reshape to his desired appearance. She shows him pictures of various looks, and Cid asks for the one that makes him appear the weakest. Gamma suggests a character named Mundane Man, a lazy dark knight with no skills, disowned by his noble family, and considered dead for the past 5 years. Cid finds it perfect, and Gamma uses a machine built by Ada to transform him accordingly. Cid is impressed with the transformation, and adjusts his posture to match his new character. Cid reflects on Gamma's intelligence, noting that she remembers all the knowledge he shared with her, but he also considers her a bit clumsy. Back at the Bushin festival, people recognize Anne Rose, who had previously managed to summon an ancient warrior at the goddess trial. She observes Cid in his mundane man disguise, taking note of his cheap gear and sickly appearance. She thinks he is an amateur, and advises him not to participate in the festival. Cid tells her that he should not be judged by appearances, and claims he doesn't need her help. Satisfied with how well his disguise works, he walks away. However, he is soon stopped by Quentin, who insists that Cid should listen to Anne Rose's advice. He mentions that he is an experienced participant in previous Bushin festivals, who has encountered weaklings like Cid before, and suggests that he should simply go home and suck on his mommy milkers. Cid provokes Quentin by mentioning that at least he is stronger than him, which infuriates Quentin. In response, Quentin picks Cid up, and punches him into an alley. Cid thinks that he can easily defeat Quentin in several ways, but he has no intention of fighting him at the moment, and lets Quentin beat him up. Anne Rose eventually intervenes to stop Quentin, and apologizes to Cid. He tells her that she could have stopped the fight at any moment, but she mentions that she allowed Quentin to beat him up so that Cid would give up, which will avoid major injury at the festival. As Cid leaves, she introduces herself and inquires about Cid's name, to which he responds with "Mundane Man." Cid later meets Skell, who is interested in placing bets, and winning money on the tournament. Skell explains the tournament structure, with preliminaries leading to the main tournament, and provides information about the favored fighters, which are Iris and Rose. Cid wants to showcase his powers later, but doesn't want to hold back too much either, and thinks about a way. Skell asks him for funds, but he distracts him with his souvenir from Lindworm, and then rejects him. While Cid is walking away, Rose approaches him, and shares details about her friendship with Alexia and Beta. She also reveals her upcoming meeting with her father, during which she will be introduced to her fiancé, Perv Asshat. Rose explains her background as a princess from a land of art and culture, mentioning how her decision to become a knight disappointed and betrayed many people. She recalls being inspired by a hero when she was a child, which led her to take up the sword. Despite the challenges and betrayals she has faced, Rose refuses to abandon her ideals. She asks Cid if he will continue to believe in her, and he assures her that he will. Later on, we see Skell and Cid watching the fights together. Skell mentions that he is collecting data to improve his betting strategies, explaining how he calculates odds for more successful bets. However, he admits that he needs some funds to achieve 100% accuracy. At this point, a fighter named Goldie Gilded appears behind them, revealing that he also analyzes data to enhance his chances of winning. Cid excuses himself for a bathroom break, and the next fight is announced between Gonzalez Machamber against Mundane Man. Goldie decides to analyze the fight, and assumes that Gonzalez's battle power is 1,364, while he thinks that Mundane Man's battle power will be only 33. Goldie anticipates Gonzalez winning quickly, and Skell is impressed by his deduction skills. As the fight begins, however, Gonzalez unexpectedly falls to the ground. The crowd assumes he tripped and lost, disappointing their expectations. Cid is announced as the winner, further disappointing the crowd, who bet against him. However, Rose realizes how Cid landed 2 quick punches on Gonzalez's chin, knocking him out. Goldie pretends that he had foreseen this outcome, and explains to Skell the strategy of either betting on fighters with higher battle power or identifying the weaker ones, and betting on their opponents. He suggests that Skell bet on his match against Cid the following day. When Cid returns from his bathroom break, Skell asks him to lend him all of his money so he can bet on Goldie, but Cid declines. The next morning, Skell knocks on Cid's door, and shows him newspaper headlines reporting that Rose has stabbed her fiancé, Perv Asshat, and ran away. Alexia and Beta evaluate Rose's situation. The Oriana Kingdom prefers to handle it internally, and has asked the Midgar Kingdom not to intervene. Beta mentions that since Perv Asshat is the second son of the Oriana Kingdom's dukes, Rose could face a severe sentence. Alexia believes that Rose's royal status would likely spare her from the death penalty, and is determined to locate her before the Oriana Kingdom does, to hear her side of the story. However, Beta suggests that Rose may have chosen not to disclose anything to avoid complicating matters for them. Alexia understands this, which is why she feels frustrated, given they are sworn allies. She instructs Beta to gather more information while she decides to seek advice from her sister. After Alexia leaves, Beta tells one of her sisters to provide Alexia with enough details about Perv Asshat which will keep her occupied, and prevent her from taking potentially troublesome actions. Beta receives information that Rose has made it through the sewers, and is currently in the underground ruins. She also learns that Rose was seen reaching out to her chest many times as she fled. Meanwhile, at the Bushin Festival, we find Cid reading a newspaper article about Rose being suspected of eloping, and he briefly wonders if she had a boyfriend. He secretly hopes for a hidden conflict unfolding behind the tournament, which will allow him to assume his role as Eminence in Shadow. As he is leaving, he encounters a person named Beatrix, who detects the scent of an elf on him, and questions whether he has seen her niece who resembles her. Cid realizes that she looks like Alpha, but denies any knowledge of such an individual. Beatrix draws her sword, but Cid is aware that she won't actually harm him. He acts like a weak background character in response. Beatrix apologizes for her mistake, and remarks that she had believed him to be stronger. She adds that he has good hands, and will grow stronger with time. Afterward, during the Bushin Festival, we see Quentin approaching Rose, who is there to observe Cid. He questions her opinion of Cid's fight from the previous day. Anrose responds that it initially appeared as if Cid's opponent had tripped and fallen, but it didn't seem like mere luck to her. Quentin asks her for further insights, and addresses her as Velgata's Seven Blades. She informs him that she has abandoned that title, and regarding Cid's fight, she mentions that his movements were too fast for her to track clearly. However, she did manage to catch a glimpse of his hand in motion. They both wonder if he might be using some sort of artifact, but they think that it will become clearer in his upcoming match against Goldie, who is regarded as an unbeaten legend. Quentin wonders if Goldie is actually unbeaten, and Anrose reveals that he tends to forfeit when matched against opponents stronger than himself. As the match starts, Goldie charges toward Cid, swinging his sword aggressively. We then hear a crack sound, and see that Cid has easily dodged his attack. Goldie realizes that he's left himself wide open, and Cid can strike him down, but Cid merely draws his sword without making any offensive moves, allowing Goldie to step back. Quentin thought that Goldie would win, but he's not sure what happened. Anrose explains that just before Goldie's sword reached Cid, he had cracked his neck at the exact time evading the strike, and they both struggle to believe that this was a mere coincidence. Goldie believes that Cid missed his chance to defeat him, and he decides to use his ultimate move and charges towards Cid. However, we see that Goldie is blown away, and ultimately defeated. Quentin wonders what happened, and Anrose clarifies that, as Goldie was about to strike, Cid sneezed, and at that very moment, his sword swung downward, resulting in an accidental strike. Quentin thinks it's ridiculous, and hopes to get answers when he faces Cid, while Anrose is impressed by Cid, and tries to imitate his moves. Later, Iris presents Lord Perv with the security plan for the Bushin festival scheduled for the following week. However, he doesn't seem to think it's necessary. Iris remarks that he looks well, despite the news of his recent injury, and Lord Perv suggests that the story may have been exaggerated. He's aware how Iris personally went looking after her sister when she was kidnapped, and mentions that they left the Oriana kingdom and family matters to them. The king also agrees with him, although he appears as if he's brainwashed. Back at the Bushin festival, Cid has defeated Quentin, leaving the spectators wondering how he keeps winning. Meanwhile, Skell is seen requesting funds from Poe, as it appears he has lost all of his bets. As Cid walks away from his match, he thinks that the last fighter was familiar, but couldn't recall who he was. Just then, he encounters Anrose, who admits that she had underestimated his strength. She informs him that she has observed all of his moves, and warns him not to assume that he can win using the same tactics against her. Cid responds with a smile, and removes his armor, which creates a hole in the ground. Anrose is shocked to realize that he had been wearing weighted chains, and holding back all this time. He tells her that playtime is over, but she tells him not to assume that he won, and cracks her neck. As Cid walks away, he wonders what she was trying to do. Meanwhile, we see Rose engaged in a battle against a soldier in a tunnel. She defeats him, and makes her escape. This is where the video ends. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next part.